Well, I want to welcome you. We're going to get started here. I'm Jason Dorsey, the president of the board, and on behalf of the Stanwood Camino Arts Advocacy Commission, I welcome you on behalf of Kat Olson, our executive director. The warmest welcome. It's really a dream come true to be here today. And so much to say, so many people to thank, but let me just begin by thanking those people that were believers in the early dream that we could do something that would bring the different arts organizations, the artists, the studios, the galleries, the civic institutions, the schools, and together to make this place beautiful and great in terms of art and culture. And that dream is really coming true. I think of Chaim and Yona, think of Richard and Robin who are here today, Carla and the city of Stanwood, and so many others who bought into that early dream. I also want to thank the Meyer family who made that dream possible. What we're going to talk about today is possible because of a really significant gift of a building and of funds that will help us catalyze an art center in Stanwood. Now, what is this night about? I want to say, from my perspective, that it is about access to art. Now, why does access to art matter? I want to tell you a little bit about my story. In 1969, my dad and mom and myself, about 6 months old, moved to Camino Island to a 10-acre piece of land where Dad lived out his dream to be a full-time artist. He converted a fox shed that was on the property into a studio, calling it Sunny Shore Studio, and began to make his living as an artist. Well, jump forward about 14 years. I was a troubled end of middle school, going into high school student. Me and some friends got into some trouble, as young people will do. I was read my rights by the police and ended up getting a misdemeanor for my actions. I'm not going to tell you exactly what we did, but the fact of the matter is that my mom and dad took me to the juvenile hall in Everett because they wanted me to see where I was heading. And yet, nevertheless, that isn't the path that I ended up taking. And part of that was because of being able to participate in athletics. It was cool to see the football team practice out there on that great field. I was involved with acting. Don Good, who is a legend in terms of a drama teacher, took me under his wings and helped mold and shape me as a young man and gave me an opportunity to act. But also I had an opportunity to do art. Growing up, my mom had supplied us with art supplies, paints, and so on. But when I was 16, I walked into that studio my dad had converted out of the fox shed, pulled out a big sheet of watercolor paper, began to paint, and lo and behold, what came out was kind of good. I could tell that I had some ability and that I was good at this. And that's pretty significant for a 16-year-old. I ended up submitting a painting that I did a little while after that, earned an award in the top 7 in Washington State. And really that began my journey to believe that I could do something with art. See, I had access to art. I had a mom who provided, those tools. I had a dad who had a studio whose door was open and I could just go in and use the things that were in there. But not all kids have access to art. And not all kids are athletes or actors. Some of them have gifts in art. And what tonight is about is opening the door of access to art and art opportunities and art community and saying, come in, check it out, see if this is for you. So as exciting as a building is, as exciting as what you're going to see is, remember it is about access to art. So come in.
Thanks, Jason. For my part tonight, I am going to introduce the board and SCAAC staff and the design team that's been working on the project. My name's Carm Pierce. I welcome you to this evening's presentation, and we're very excited to share with you and to continue to share with the community and get your feedback. As I mentioned the board members, if you could each briefly stand when I say your name and take a look at the board member, especially if you don't already know most of the board members, because afterwards there's going to be an opportunity to have discussion with the board members, with the staff, and with the design team. And so it'll be good to recognize who those people are and what their roles are so that you can go and chat with the people that you would like to do. So for this evening, we'll start off with Jason Dorsey, who already spoke, and you know. Carla Matsky is the vice president of the board. She's up there. Rose Olson, the treasurer, waving in the corner. Myself, Carm Pierce. David Casera. Dina Lane. I don't know if Dina's with us this evening. Judith Fernandez, right here in front. Thanks, Judith. Noel Azure. And Sam Fairley. And that's SCAAC's board of directors. Now I'd like to introduce SCAAC's staff. First of all, our executive director, the tireless Kat Olson. Our programming coordinator, Emily Feckus. And digital media coordinator, Hannah Gould, up there on top. The building committee is made up of board members and staff that I already mentioned, but as well Dave Pelletier, who's the owner's rep, who's out here by the entrance. And in addition, we have just included a new board member, or a new building committee member, Mark Kerfman, who will be joining the building committee with us shortly and helping us in our efforts. And he's a local architect, and he's up there. All right. So for our design team, and presenting tonight will be Olson, Kundig, Designs Northwest, and Lankford Associates for landscape. For Olson Kundig, we have Kirsten Ring Murray down here in front, Michael Caddy, Merrick Welder, and Aim Zahuma Shiva. I told her, as much as I practice it, I was still going to mess it up. For our local advisory architect, Dan Nelson. And from Lankford and Associates, Scott Lankford. Up there. Thanks to our design team. So for tonight's agenda, before I turn it over to Rose and to Kat to discuss our survey results from the survey that was conducted back in the summer, I'm going to go through an agenda briefly so it'll give you an idea of what to expect tonight. So as I mentioned, Kat and Rose will be reviewing the survey results, and the designs that you see tonight are predicated on those survey results partially, along with other things like the feasibility study that was conducted roughly 3 years ago, which Dan Nelson will speak to, along with the site conditions. Olson Kundig will present the building design, including the programming and opportunities to reuse components of the existing building, parking accessibility, and exterior materials and style. And then Scott Langford will discuss landscape approach, not only for the specific to the site, but also for the neighborhood and for the city planning as far as that he's working on as well, and what the city has in their plans for the future that ties into the landscape approach for this specific site. So with that, please give a warm welcome to Kat and Rose.
Oh, welcome everyone. I'm so glad that everyone came out tonight on this October night. It's a very exciting point in what the Stanwood Camano Arts Advocacy Commission has been doing, and we have this exciting opportunity for our community. When the Meyer family reached out to the founding members of SCAAC with the idea of donating their building in West Stanwood so that SCAAC could develop it into an arts and cultural center, there was a great deal of excitement. So, as the world entered lockdown in 2020, with all of the uncertainty and anxiety that went with that time, this project was a beacon of hope for the Stanwood Camano arts community. Our first outreach for community input happened in April 2020, when consultants from ArtSpace walked us through a wish list exercise. Leaders representing the arts groups, the Historical Society, the City of Stanwood, local businesses, and interested community members all gathered together on Zoom. For most of us, it was our first time on Zoom, to dream together about what things an art center in Stanwood might contain and how it might function, what the architects call the program. This was the beginning of the design process that the architects will discuss tonight. And then fast forward to 2023.
I'll take it. Rose had the good sense to write all this down. So in 2023, April of this year, is that better? We conducted a survey again. This one is more specific to programming. There were 32 questions on it. Some of them were demographics, some were about structure, physical structure of the building, and some were about space usage. So classes, workshops, what kinds of classes, events, getting a background on what kind of art centers were visited by the people that were taking the survey. We had it on our website. We offered print copies. We took copies to senior centers so they could also complete it and tabulated that. We advertised on social media, had it advertised through all the art groups in town, so we got a good swath of responses. We had just under 400 responses to the survey, so we're going to show some of the responses there. And as we go through the results of the survey, note that some of the questions had multiple answers that could be selected. So some you could choose 2 of your preferred, 3 of your preferred, as many as you wanted. And there were some long form answers as well. So you'll see some questions about the building itself and then about the programs.
So the first one you see is, what styles of architecture do you like? There were 363 total votes. And you can see people in Stanwood Camano like a variety of architecture styles. There they are. And the next pie chart, people could pick more than one. The outside of the building would look great with, and several bubbled up, but again, there were a variety of answers to that one.
And the ever important roofline question. So the building that's currently standing there has a gable roof. So it has a border around it so you can't still see it, but that was an original design, so it was included here, as well as shed, flat, and other, which could mean no roof at all. We are going to put a roof on it. And then thinking about the neighborhood, should it reflect the neighborhood or should it stand out? And you can see that people were sort of even on those two.
Okay, now this is where people really got into offering a lot of votes. If you cannot see these will be available on our website. What interior features would you like to see in the Art Center? The top 3 were natural light, high ceiling, and reclaimed materials. Rooms and resources that you'd like to see. Classes and studios, galleries, indoor-outdoor space, and a gift shop. And it goes on from there. Like the original group that got together, the respondents had a lot of creative ideas of what could go into the Art Center.
We also asked about parking because that is an issue on both sides of town. So we wanted to see how far people would be willing to walk for an art center. The good news is that within 3 to 4 and more blocks, there's a lot of municipal parking, larger parking lots available. And of course, there's street parking. And then the landscaped space, we'll have small pockets of usable outdoor space. And it seemed like combining green with art was the most popular option. So that's a good one. And then Olson Kundig was kind enough to do a word cloud for us, and you can see some of the words that came up in some of those longer form answers. A lot of people saying traditional and modern, which is awesome. A lot of people said brick, which is really helpful. So this is that. So now I get to turn it over to Dan.
Thank you for inviting me to be part of the presentation today. So in 2020, just as the pandemic began, Designs Northwest was asked to do the feasibility study for the new Arts Center. And so we all know what that meant. It meant trying to put together the feasibility study in some very difficult conditions. But so we began the study by engaging a variety of specialists, geotechnical engineers, structural engineers, asbestos abatement folks. And so then as we began the project, we went back to look at some of the historic context of the building. And so what we have here is a slide of the original building that was built in 1904. And so you can see the character of the building with the storefront and lots of glass. Again, it's in that turn of the century style. And so then the building was owned by a couple different owners until the 1940s. And in the 1940s, Carrie Richardson's grandparents, the Puseys, bought the building. And so they owned the building all the way up into the 1980s, I believe. And then Carrie Richardson's family continued to own it and rent it out to the home center. And so over the years, the building had experienced different upgrades and facade configurations. So the character of the building, as you can tell, as everybody is probably pretty familiar with the existing building, the character had changed quite a bit over the years. And so one of the issues that we had when we started to look at the existing conditions was to figure out how our original goal was actually to repurpose the original building into the Art Center. That was our goal. And so that, as we began the feasibility study, that is what we really tried to accommodate. The building is in what we call a Main Street business commercial zone with a historic overlay. And in this historic overlay, their parking is not required. And for the most part, the building can be built up to the property lines. And the architectural style that is encouraged by the city is a style that you would find in the 1880s to the 1920s. And so that's kind of a beginning concept for what the city would like to see in this district. Again, our goal was to try to repurpose the building as much as possible. And so we looked at the structure and the ground conditions, and as I think I mentioned, when the building was built in 1904, they didn't build the building with foundations. And so over the years, the piles that the building sat on started to shift and sink, and so there were a lot of issues with the existing foundation. Now, one of the big issues that we have to work with in older buildings like this is if the remodel work that takes place on the building exceeds 50% of the assessed value of the existing structure, the entire building has to be brought up to current building codes. And so the assessed value of this structure really is not that high. And the investment that will be taking place to upgrade this building would far exceed 50% of that assessed value. And so the challenge with that is the building is in the floodplain. As we probably all know, Stanwood is in a floodplain. And this building currently is about 3 feet below the base flood elevation. And so one of the things that would have to be done in order to repurpose the building is to lift it up out of the floodplain and put new foundations in. And the soil conditions are so difficult, they're so bad in this part of Stanwood that auger cast piles would have to be drilled into the ground. And so one of the challenges would be to lift the building up, drill the auger cast piles, set it back down. And that's just one element, because the other part of it is the building would have to be brought up to seismic conditions for earthquakes. And so by the time you lift the building up and you retrofit the structure with a rigid frame to accommodate earthquakes, a large part of the building would be difficult to keep. And so as a result of working with structural engineers and looking at the existing conditions, our recommendation was to repurpose elements of the building into a new structure. And so, so that was our final recommendation, was to repurpose the various structural elements. There's a lot of really nice beams in there, hardwood floors, and various, as you can see, there's some shelving and there's a rolling ladder. And so the idea now is to incorporate a lot of these structural elements into the new building. And so again, here is kind of a diagram that shows the floodplain elevation. So you can see where the ground level is. And the code requires that, that the new structure, the finished floor elevation has to be a foot above the ground, a foot above the base flood elevation, which is about 4 feet above the ground. And so as you'll see in the designs as they develop here, that the existing floor level is going to be about 4 feet above the ground level. So that's our study.
Well, good evening, everyone. Thank you very much for coming out. We look forward to all of the comments that we expect to receive immediately in the reception right after the presentation here. But this is just an overview of some of the thoughts and input that has been collected over the recent years and how it's starting to come together in what is a early design. There's still time for feedback and there's still time for evolution, but as we go through this presentation, I hope that it's somewhat apparent that you will hear some of these community inputs coming back and starting to manifest themselves in what is a pretty interesting plan for this new building and new place. This is a site plan which shows the Art Center. It's surrounded in red. I think you all are probably somewhat familiar with the site, but as has been said, this building that preceded it was very much an anchor in what was a main street. So there was a street-facing big glass window and primary focus on being along 270th Street Northwest. Well, today we find a very much an evolved urban condition. We find a street that's got both historic and contemporary buildings. We find a street that probably works a little differently than it used to, and also a site that has a couple of other really important viewpoints. We have the, I'll say the east elevation, which is somewhat makes itself apparent from several different viewpoints from across town, and as you enter the site from that angle, To the south, it's also visible from what is now probably the primary automotive circulation in the area. So it's a building that really has multiple sides, and it's, as such, has a little bit of a civic presence. It's a bit of a building that stands as an object that has various relationships with different portions of the site. And we also have pointed out there are other interesting neighbors that are both cultural and business neighbors to this. So that's something that we think about as we're starting to organize the building program on the site. Now, the building program is just very simply the things that happen in the building. And that has come very much from your outreach and input. And to date, we have planned a very flexible building, a building that has a lot of different ways it can be used. And I think that's really important to arts facilities and in the public realm. On level 1, the ground level, we imagine there's going to be a gift shop and some type of gallery space. As you'll see, probably a 2-story gallery space, and then other gallery opportunities throughout the building. Classrooms and studios, which can be used separately or joined together for larger functions. There'll be office space for the staff. There'll be a kitchen to use both for the staff and perhaps to support events, community events. There'll be other support spaces, mechanical, storage, electrical, etc. On level 2, we'll have some more gallery space, more classrooms and studios, a meeting room, a media room, office, and again, more storage and support areas. And some of the images you see on the right are just collage images that give you a sense of the types of experiences that you might be able to anticipate in this building. Now, as Dan was showing, this is the building that we see today, and we entered at the point. Our first thought was the same. Well, can't you save the building? Can't you do something to the building? And this conversation had evolved into what is it that we should know about the building, that we should understand about its history, and that we should see opportunity in how we can preserve both the materials to reuse, but also the spirit of the building, which is a kind of a nuanced exercise for design. But some of the things that stood out to us, first of all, the big glass, that used to be much larger, but the big glass facade that addresses the street that says, look in, see what's happening here. Very much part of what a store building would do, but a very, very public, very welcoming presence in that respect. There's a clear story, some higher glass that's there now that replaced when the original facade was shrunk a little bit and the uses changed. In a commercial building like this of that era, the building has always been something that held signage. That was a beacon. It was a useful building. It wanted you to see what products and brands were there. So the idea of lettering and signage and things being placed on the building was appropriate, and it's historic. Let's see. And also an entry canopy, a sense of something that's welcoming, something that invites, it offers some protection to the public. On the inside, something that is a delightful experience when you go into a building is to see a large volume. So there's this large 2-story central space surrounded by a mezzanine. And that's something that I think you'll recognize in the concept to date. Also, as has been pointed out, there's some interesting large timber elements, some details. We'll go into that a little bit more. But again, that sense of having a mezzanine where you can look down on a space, you can be down in the space and look up at people in the mezzanine and have that sort of spatial relationship we think is fascinating and very appropriate for an art center to see and to be seen. So an early conceptual plan, you'll see here on the elevation, you'll have a chance to kind of see these on some closer out in the lobby soon. But let's see, I don't think we have a pointer. Okay, I'm going to point. Imagine you are in the middle of the building all the way to the right side. That is your entry point. Because we have the 4-foot elevation, we had to have a way to bring people up in wheelchairs or that, or otherwise, not going upstairs up to this site. So you'll see pathways around that bring you up gently to an elevated sculpture garden and an entry point that is visible from the street, from across the way to the corner, and also from the road to the side. You enter into a gift shop that's an open area space. The gift shop might be a place where obviously someone sitting there selling some gifts perhaps, but also welcoming, guiding people, helping them understand what the options are and how to use the building. Large gallery space, we've shown some walls in there, would probably be very flexible, 2-story, with movable partitions and all kinds of things that would evolve over the years to suit the specific exhibit needs or other functional needs of the space. We have 2 classrooms, studio spaces that could be brought together through a movable wall, and that space to the right you'll see you could open it up and go right outside into an outdoor sculpture garden, outdoor terrace. So you can have indoor-outdoor programming, and you can imagine how fun and useful that could be for events, for large format art, for all kinds of things. There's a kitchen, which again can serve a lot of functions, can support gathering in the gallery, parties, functions, openings, weddings, bar mitzvahs, what have you. Office space on the ground floor and upstairs. We think that it's the staff that are there are part of the experience, part of the use of the space, so we wanted to make sure there was office presence, throughout staff presence throughout the building, and mechanical plumbing and storage with a loading dock and some parking, easy access from the primary automotive road. And these red lines show a little bit about the accessibility. So you might have parked in the neighborhood and walked here, you might have gotten dropped off, or you might come here and you might park in the parking spots there, where you would be able to take a gentle ramp up to the front door. You would come in, you would have access upstairs via 2 different stairways or an elevator, which is visible from the entry, and you could then go upstairs and downstairs as needed. And the loading, again, happens off the parking lot. We have 1 elevator, and that elevator, this is an efficient building. The elevator will serve passengers. It will also be convenient for staff to go up and down and to move goods and materials that come in through the loading dock. On the upper level, in the mezzanine, again, a mezzanine experience. One thing I forgot to mention, you go up the stairs or up the elevator, there will be a terrace that overlooks the sculpture garden, which could be, again, wonderful for functions and experiences. That could be a bit of a sculpture. It could have sculpture programming. It could be good for events and other kind of social uses. Another open gallery space that could have separate programming or artist in residency, or could be programmed in addition to in connection with the main gallery. Another classroom and studio that has an interesting window that looks back out at this higher elevation and captures some long views down the south side. And then again, a media office and a storage, and then a meeting room, which has really interesting perspective, a window that looks back down into the studio space, or that looks out onto the street.
So as Dan had already discussed a little bit, at some point we realized we had to pivot away from being able to renovate the existing building. So it became more about reclaiming materials and how can we get the spirit of the existing building and use elements that are already there to kind of activate the space and just kind of have that spirit of the building. So what you see on the right-hand side are just some various ideas and concepts we're thinking about. There's that great library ladder that kind of slides on a track, ways you can integrate that. Reclaimed wood materials, could be cladding for things. There's storage elements that you find in a hardware store typically. Those could activate the gift shop. And then just all sorts of interesting found objects as well that could be put on display. So those are just things we're starting to look at and think about for the interiors.
Great. Now here's just a few conceptual images of what this volume might feel like. And one of the things you'll notice to the left is a big window. This window would face the main street, would face 270th, much like the original hardware store would. So again, that ability for people outside to look up and into the space. We've shown we've imagined some temporary art walls and exhibit stands, and you're also looking back into what could be a gift shop area. Again, a real flexible flow of space between those two areas. A stair that takes you upstairs to the mezzanine, different mezzanine located functions. And we see exposed structure with a lot of use of wood, both new material and salvaged material as we get further into the technical resolution of the building. Here's another view. You'll notice the ladder. But again, the other thing you're seeing on the left, you're looking out towards the main street, towards the traditional main street. And what you're seeing, the doorway those windows are looking out towards what we imagine is a sculpture park and a new entry to the building. And as Michael was describing, an opportunity to have a gift shop that it not only serves as a welcoming entry, but also has eyes on the street and is available to the street, very much like a retail store should be. Now, we're going to take you through a few options. This building is not completely designed yet, so it's a perfect time for us to take some of those concepts, some of that word cloud, those feelings that you have about materials and stylistic things, and start to try them on the building. The building itself is a very simple form. It has a gable roof. It has it's a really flexible volume, which is very appropriate to this building typology. It has a relationship that way to a lot of the other buildings in the area. But how it's the fit and finish, the materiality of the building and how it's expressed can really create some different experiences. So
we did a series of studies of different materials. So you'll see 4 different material palettes. So this first one is more natural materials, exploring transparency, perhaps more modern in style. And so let's take a look at how that could be.
So some of what you see here, you'll see wood used as the primary exterior material in this particular study, and that could be reclaimed wood, that could be new wood. We'll work on that. But again, very natural. It almost evokes a boathouse kind of a sensibility. We're using some perforated metal to sort of pop out and highlight the entry and the store. You can see the big window facing the street, and you can see some of the activity of the sculpture park. But again, just a general attitude of the wood being the primary exterior material in this scenario. So you can look at these more closely later.
So this next palette is perhaps more contextual, fits within the neighborhood perhaps, and you'll see brick and reclaimed materials. It's a little more of a traditional look to the building.
Again, we're trying different jackets on the same frame, but we have, again, predominantly brick expression of material.
This material palette is diving a little more into the industrial look. It's more about metals and the agrarian feel, maybe the rural aspects of the area, and just another look at how the envelope could be. So that's what that one looks like. So it's a lot more metals. And then we have one more. So this last one is more playful. You'll see a lot more color, artistic. It actually kind of plays off of the Mac a little bit that has a lot of color going for it. So this one could look something like this.
Of course, likely with commissioned art that might end up looking quite different from this. But again, it also draws back to the history of the building having signage all over it and being really about telling you what you were going to find inside. So you'll get a chance to give feedback and look at these out in the lobby and have conversations with all of us. But we look forward to your input. And now we're going to invite Scott up to tell us a little bit about how that fits into the bigger landscape and urban design planning of the town.
We have a unique opportunity here to tie this building into some future development that was planned for the West Historic District. And we're in preliminary stages with this, but part of them includes hanging on to the existing brick road where we can, next to the Arts Center. And then doing overlays to the existing street, picking up the brick theme that we have with stamp patterns, and an overlay to bring the surface up to a smooth, continuous level so that we don't have curbs you can trip off of. And the idea is that this is a multifunction place, that there will be street fairs, there will be food markets, and the opportunity to actually flow into the Arts Center and from the Arts Center into the Historic District is what we're hoping to tie into. This is really quite a gateway, and the intent is to emphasize the gateway that we're going to be working with. And so this corner triangle area, it's just gray right now. We don't know what's going to happen here, but the idea is that we take and tie into the Art Center with this space and potentially create sculpture areas, create artisan areas that can be set up and taken down, and potentially allow additional handicap access if needed. And so these are all ideas that are currently being looked at with the idea of also realigning this triangle intersection that we have right now. Slow people down, stop them, and then turn them back to the SR 532. Right now, the space is used as a bypass, and we're trying to slow that down, make people pause, and then using that brick road, that's a great speed bump. That thing really slows folks down. And so it's also an interesting walking area. I was recently in Europe, and some of those cobblestone plazas are in much worse shape, and people get around them quite fine. But the sidewalks, the crosswalks, these are all going to be improved and built upon. We're looking at a palette of plants that are both Northwest natives and more of our regional plantings. And the idea is that it's very lush, low maintenance, inviting, fragrance, textures, and that will be working up through on both sides of these accessibility ramps. And the idea is that the sculpture garden then will flow into this triangle space that we have, where the two spaces will reinforce each other. This is a very important part of what we're trying to do with the city. And there will be street tree planting. There's going to be a holiday tree down here too at some point. So these are the basic elements that we're looking at with the landscape. And I think that's it.
Okay, so that concludes the presentation of images up here in this room. You'll see some next steps. So on your way in, there were opportunities to grab a comment card and a pen. Hopefully you've taken some notes or have some thoughts. You want to write them down. You can just pop them in the comment box and continue on with your evening. If you'd like to meet with one of the board members or building committee members or someone else from Olson Kundig perhaps, we will be in the lobby area. And ready to have conversations. We have some of these slides available as boards out there so you can get a closer look because it kind of went quickly. So we'll be at meet and greet in the lobby, that's that. We have been recording this, so we will be offering this recording on our website. It's our website /Art Center, and that is where we will also be providing updates as this project, enormous project, continues. So go ahead and bookmark that. And then tomorrow morning is our monthly meeting. Every third Wednesday of the month we meet. The SCAAC community meets. Tomorrow's discussion at 10 a.m. via Zoom will be about the building, about the presentation that happened tonight. Usually we talk about classes and teachers and art projects and things that are going on, but tomorrow will be solely dedicated to this. So if you want to join in that as well, or if you have neighbors, friends, family members that couldn't make it tonight that want to participate in that, the Zoom link for that is also available at /Art Center. So if the board members and Olson Kundig members and folks could head on out to get ready. We have clipboards out there for everybody to take comments, give them a little bit of a head start so they can be ready for you when you exit. And we can cheer them on as they go, right? Thank you, everyone. Okay, so that concludes this portion of the evening. Exit through the gift shop, right?